Today, speaking about the Norse holidays in the Southern Hemisphere and when to celebrate them. And I was actually very surprised to see so many of you on the survey are in the Southern Hemisphere watching this channel, and it makes me happy that so many people far away from their ancestral lands are looking into their own heritage and trying to get things the historically accurate way. And I've actually studied this quite a lot because I've been seriously thinking about moving to New Zealand and starting a homestead or a farm there. Man, I promise you, if the Vikings had a chance to travel down there and explore, you can bet 100% that they would have settled New Zealand. I love Australia, and I love other places in the Southern Hemisphere too. I love Australians. I don't love the country or the weather. If the Vikings sailed there, they would have got off the boat in the blistering heat and saw all the creepy crawlies and predators, and they said, fuck this shit, and they would have sailed on to New Zealand. And if there were any Vikings that did stay in Australia, they would have been dead from skin cancer by now, like I've got. Like, I've had different parts all over my body. But some Australians, or people living in the Southern Hemisphere, are a lot tougher than I am and can deal with the nature down there. So for everyone, this is what the sources say about when to celebrate the holidays if you were in the Southern Hemisphere. So I've done tons of videos on these in my Bloot series where you guys can see where, why, how, when these were all practiced. It won't surprise you that we don't really know a whole lot from the ancient sources. There are quite a few people reconstructing calendars and these holidays and trying to get the dates right and things like that. The best is Dr. Andreas Neuberg. If you read Swedish, he has a lot of books, but he does have a couple in English, and I will link those below. But basically, what we know for sure from the actual ancient sources is that there were three major blots, or high festivals, throughout the year. There are a few sources for this, Heimskringla being the main and most famous one. The first one is Vetternatter, winter nights, which marked the start of the winter. Mind you, in the Norse calendar we only had 2 seasons, so this was also our New Year's celebration at this time. In the Northern Hemisphere, this is the full moon right around Halloween time, but in the Southern Hemisphere, this would be the full moon around April. So the moons are a bit late this year, so it was the 26th of April in 2021, but it's usually a little bit earlier. I'm not going to go into what the sources say on how to celebrate these, because I've done tons of other videos on that. The sources vary depending on where you were in Scandinavia at the time, but the main reason for this bloot and celebration at winter nights was to bring good luck, and also it was a great time to contact your ancestral spirits. So this is the main idea about Vetternatter, but there's much more. Check out my videos on that. Number 2 is the bloot welcoming summer, and this one is quite mysterious because we only have a couple sources in the old texts about this, but the name was most likely Sigerbloot, victory bloot, and it would have been done probably to Odin for victory for the coming summer and year. Again, the date is easy for this one. It's the start of summer. In the Southern Hemisphere, that would be the full moon right around Halloween. So this coming year, it's going to be on the 20th of October for you. I've done 2 other videos about how to celebrate that as well, even though we don't know a whole lot. There are some things that can be reconstructed from it. The third and final main bloot is Yule, of course. Now everybody gets this wrong, and they celebrate it on the winter solstice. I have no idea where it comes from, why people started to do this. There is no source that says it that way from ancient times. It's probably a Wicca thing. I know I like most Wicca people a lot. Cool people, most of them, but the founder of Wicca just kind of combined a whole bunch of stuff and made his own religion pretty much, and didn't really pay attention to the old sources, really. The actual historical date that was practiced in the Norse religion was the full moon after the solstice. More likely, it was the full moon after the new moon after the solstice. That is usually the same one, depending on which year. But this year, the moons have been a bit late, so it was a bit confusing this year. So this year, Yule in the Southern Hemisphere was not the full moon last week, but it's the one coming this month in July. It's going to be the 24th of July, Yule in the Southern Hemisphere. In Scandinavia, we call just plain old Christmas, we call it Yule. And what happened was there, Olav Tryggvason, the Norwegian king that was Christian and trying to convert the pagan people at the time to practice Yule on the birth of Jesus. In some other sources, it was the winter solstice, and they changed some things around, had some different calendars, and messed up a whole bunch of things the next couple of 100 years, and just made a big fucking mess of it all, and it gets confusing. And they did this to so many pagan holidays. They couldn't get people to stop celebrating the holidays, so they just changed the date a little and gave it a Christian name. Almost all of them this happened with, but especially Yule. But yeah, original pagan Yule, the first full moon after the new moon after the winter solstice. And this was done in many, many ways, but primarily, this was for a good harvest, this celebration. A video on Yule and all the sources there is also below. That is about all the ones that we know for sure. Only 3, not just in the Norse world, but in the whole Germanic world, we are pretty certain that there was these 3 that were the main ones everywhere. We can maybe mention one more big one, Disting or Disablot. We don't know if that was the right name, but we're pretty certain. Now, this is debated. It seems like this blot only happened in Sweden at Uppsala, and they have a massive festival once a year and a sacrifice. We don't have records of this blot happening at this particular time anywhere else in Scandinavia at the time, but if you do want to practice this, it's 2 full moons after Yule, so that brings us to September 20th for this coming year. I made videos about that, what all the sources say. Also, you can look at those in the links below. So those are the 4 that we know for sure. There are a couple more that we know from the ancient sources, like Alpha Blot, which seems like it could be actually celebrated at any time almost. And then we have some vague mention of a midsummer blot in Olav Tryggvason's saga. But in both of these, we don't know much, and we definitely don't know the specific dates. So all of these are open for reconstructions if you want to. What I just went over, these 4, is what we know from the Norse sagas and other ancient sources around Northern Europe. However, did we only have 3 or 4 holidays? Absolutely not. We damn Germanic people love to take days off and celebrate things. If any of you have lived for longer periods of time in the north of Europe, there's a damn holiday every few weeks and the whole country shuts down. So almost all of these holidays had some pagan origin. Like I said before, the Christians came in and tried to get the people to stop celebrating these pagan holidays. They couldn't make them do that, but what they did was give the holiday a Christian name, and then they maybe changed up the dates and the tradition a little bit. Look, of course, the Norse and all the Germanic peoples, and probably all people around Europe, we all had a midsummer celebration. Of course, we celebrated the solstices, the equinoxes, and many, many other things. We just don't have records of it in the Norse sagas. All we have records of are the main blots that go back to the time where Odin lived more than 2,000 years ago. But there are many, many more holidays that we have records of in the Scandinavian folk tradition, from as late as the 1700s, some of them. But most of them have absolutely pagan origin. An amazing book to read about that is Våra Traditioner by Vegard Solheim. He studies all of these old sources and speaks about the pagan origins of most of these traditions and holidays. Also, a large part of the book is about interpreting the gods and what they really represent. It is a must-read for any Norse pagan. It's my top 5 favorite books of all time. Link below if you want to check that out. He just has an English version now, so everyone can read that. It's just been in Norwegian before, but that's about all I have to say. Conclusions: there were 3 major blots per year. We can maybe add a 4th one if you want and still be historically accurate. The rest we just don't know, but of course we can take all of these holidays from more modern times and reconstruct these things, because holidays and celebrations and these traditions don't really change that much over time. So you're free to do whatever you like. The 4 holidays is just what the sources say, but of course all these things are open for reconstruction, and I would love to see your ideas and see how you guys all celebrate these as well. So that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.